The Pines That Watched Part 3. Many times I begin to see movement, the silhouette of a man silently making his way towards me as I lay there paralyzed until closing my eyes. Of course, he never got any closer, but I could very well see his bulky figure assuredly stepping through the portal to reach my room. My being aware of him was enough to bring him to life, but this one night was different. I heard the house creaking and settling in the breeze of the landscape. Something was worming its way in, and again, I watched and waited for the shadow man to make his approach. He took a lot longer to appear this time, and when he did, the stress of my recent overthinking began to stretch the apparition to its logical extremes. He was misshapen this time, lopsided like the fist of a god pressed him into a clay putty nonsense shape. Instead of the obviously shimmering, hallucinatory outline I'd become familiar with, he was lined with squirming, wriggling lines. Black enough to have no discernible details, but material enough to display the sheen of some shiny, hairy, perhaps viscous material. It watched me for what felt like eons that night before stumbling out of view. I saw his bulbous head peek back into the door frame for a second, showing some tenuous understanding of the mutual observation that was taking place. And as my heart froze into a block of ice, the shadow man melted into little black worms and scurried into the darkness. After we moved out prematurely due to a prominent black mold issue, the years passed in a faded blur. As with all childhood nightmares, the details I felt were real enough to ask my parents about were dismissed with notions of, "Oh, that didn't happen," or "You probably just imagined it. You always had an active mind, kiddo." It would have to suffice until recently, after memories of the incident drove my curiosity to its breaking point. As an adult, you have the power to strip your nightmares bare, and as an accomplished writer, I desired to farm some inspiration for future works. I found the old address and drove out to it one afternoon. The ambiguously rural cul-de-sac was still there, untainted by time or a pale blue noon sun. Still green and luscious as the day we left, and unsurprisingly, the house was gone. The foundation had long since been paved over with cement and overgrown with various weeds and sticker brush. It was amazing seeing just how tiny that little shithole was, but I was also grateful we'd had it at all, feeling myself tense up. I crept towards the fabled hill I'd never before had access to. By my own authority, I strode to the edge and gazed across the forest top, and trailed my way down to where those trees once stood. It defies all logic, what I saw down there. The way I'd heard my parents describing the structural decay definitely implied that the house would be a crumpled mess by the time we left. Even a child could be sure of it. And yet, down where the nightmare trees of my childhood stood waving in anticipation for my return, there was my house. Nestled between them like some strange face resting chin down at the tree-lined entrance. It looked pretty much the same, just positioned downward at about 30 to 40 meters on the incline, which was not as steep as I remembered, so that I could see a bit of the roof as well. In fact, I was acutely aware of just how close the trees were, and I felt my gut sink. The hollow windows blinked back at me,